Hello, it's about that time again on Indigenous Hands, the Indigenous Voices, where we spend time dissecting Indigenous sign languages. I'm happy to be here once again to conclude on the topic that I've been treating for the past 3-4 weeks, which is language development in deaf children or deaf child language development. And if you have been following me, you know that we've been doing justice to this topic by looking at the first week and second week incorporating the manual articulators, and the third and fourth week looking at how the deaf child deals with gestures during language development process. But before I continue to round off this topic today, I want to announce to you our forthcoming virtual international conference that is coming up on Indigenous sign languages and spoken languages of Africa. The theme of the conference is the Indigenous Hands and Voices of African Identity. And this is an opportunity for both deaf and hearing scholars of African communities to come and present their works. The conference is coming up on the 7th and 8th of January 2021, which is about the week that we observe the International Day of Indigenous Languages. And this is going to be the debut of that conference, and we are working hard to make it a very successful one. All right. I'm also very, very happy to announce to you that we are approaching the International Day of Sign Languages, which is observed worldwide since 2018. And this year in Esdale, it is going to be more of virtual. During that week, we observe our program called Triple Action Project, TAP, which incorporates the International Day of Sign Languages, the International Week of the Deaf, and the International Literacy Day. This Triple Action Program is going to be coming to you with a very powerfully packed virtual program come September 23, 2020. So these are some of the programs that are coming forth, and that we're working very hard to make sure that these programs are a success. All right, let's have a break. Okay, today I am rounding off on this topic, and I do not just want to take us far away in discussing a very new thing about the topic again: language development in deaf children. We have looked at how the deaf children can incorporate the manual articulators. We have looked at how the deaf children would also deal with gestures during language acquisition. But there's one salient point I want to bring out today, which is the issue of language acquisition when there is no language. So, language acquisition when there is no language. I want to bring out an analogy. In the study of speech and hearing sciences, we study how development occurs in children. And if you do not know, there is stage for every development in babies, even in the womb. And physicians will tell you more about this, the stages of different development. And there are developments that happen in the womb, and there are developments that happen after birth. Child language acquisition is one of those developments that happen after birth. But there's one development that happens in the womb I want to draw our attention to. When we were back in the villages, we used to see some people, adults and children, whose clefts are broken apart. And I cannot remember the feelings we used to have as children seeing people in that form. And as children, we also wondered what could be the issue with this person, what could be the reason for such maldevelopment of the mouth. But anyway, without any information, that we wouldn't know what that is. But I know that seeing a person with a cleft issue was a kind of sight for us as children. Now, have you wondered why we have people that have cleft problem? Some of them happen in the upper reach of the teeth, which we call the palate. Some of them happen on the lips physically. And these people have problems with phonation, problems with even swallowing and eating. I know that it is treatable. People get surgery and they stitch it together and it looks like it is normal again. But I want to draw our attention to what causes cleft palate or palate clefting. This is a problem of lack of complete development of the child in the womb. When a child is developing, every stage that there is need for a particular addition of the flesh or bone or the veins or whatever part of the body that needs to be developed, that will be added. That is how nature made it. This development happens in the womb. When a child fails to develop this part of the body, either the palate or the upper skin, for whatever reason, and it gets to the point of childbirth, that child will be born with cleft palate. That child will be born with maldevelopment on this part of the body, and it becomes something to see. It becomes something when people see it to also worry about. What happens at that particular moment? For whatever biological reason, the child did not stitch up this part of the body. The baby in the womb, the fetus, failed to stitch up the upper lip or the palate, the hard palate. The baby is going to come out with cleft. The baby is going to come out with cleft palate. And it becomes something to worry about by the parents. This is because that development did not happen. So I come from a community and a country where one of the issues that bother deaf people and teachers of deaf children in school is the problem of deaf people writing bad English. So they claim that deaf children do not know how to write English. Because of a truth, a lot of them do not know how to write English. And a lot of people seem to want to attach importance to the teaching of English to deaf children in school, deaf students, as opposed to or over and above the acquisition of language. This is worrisome to a lot of people working in a deaf community, whereby they want deaf persons to write better English, but they are not. A lot of people have made a very made baseless argument about why is it that deaf people are not good at writing English. We should concentrate more on teaching them English. Oh, no. Part of the question I ask all the time, is it because English in this country of ours is a language that is taking precedence in education and other businesses of life? Have you considered if it wasn't English, it was their own native spoken language? Have you considered whether a deaf person knows how to write that? But that's not the problem. The problem is not which language the deaf person does not know how to write well. It's not about English. It is not about the teachers. It is not about the school. It is about something that happened, that failed to happen rather, when it is supposed to happen. And everything that has to do with lack of or misplaced child language development. So what am I saying? And I keep saying the problem is not English. In the first place, English is a foreign language of foreign country, of a foreign culture. we are discussing English as if it is our cultural identity. It is not. Let that get into our ears and our head. We found ourselves in a situation that we that are speaking English speak English as if our life depends on it. It is not. Studies have shown that when a deaf child fails to acquire language within the period that they're supposed to acquire language, whatever language at all, because some people become deaf after like 2-3 years. This topic I'm going to be talking about from next week. But I want to bring out something that to round off the topic I've been dealing with for the past 3-4 weeks, which is the reason deaf people seem to not write English well. It is because of lack of acquisition during the time acquisition of language should happen. Studies have shown that even if a deaf child is born in an environment whereby there is no sign language, and if that deaf child was exposed to any language at all, any spoken language at all, or any other language with any other modality, if there was any other one, that deaf child who will grow up to become an adult will have issue with the learning of any language, will have issue with the development of any language. But on the other hand, if a child is born hearing and possibly becomes deaf after 2-3 years, after 4 years, after 5 years, whatever age within this age range, there would have been the prior exposure to sounds. There would have been the prior exposure to language. That exposure to language would help to facilitate language acquisition in the brain of that child that becomes deaf after all. That is to say that the exposure to spoken language helps exposure to sign language, even when that sign language exposure becomes late. So it is not because the people that teach deaf children in school do not know what to teach or how to teach English, or their schools are not equipped with well English, are not equipped with good English teaching classroom or something like that. But no, it is because, one, maybe a lot of them that are in school were born deaf. Two, those that were not born deaf, that became deaf after 2, 3, 4 years, if they had had a good exposure to spoken language, they wouldn't do as badly as those that were born deaf without any language exposure and without sign language up to the first 5 years of their lives. So in child language acquisition, what I am bringing out to you today is that there is a very good reason to believe by very many studies. Remember, all the discussions I do have are not necessarily my studies alone. I'm bringing knowledge from a whole lot of studies that have been going on for years about acquisition of sign language and acquisition of spoken language, both in deaf and in hearing children. So, what are we talking about today? Prior exposure to language, whatever language, to any child, so long as it happens before the first 5 years of age, helps to improve language behavior at any age, even up to adulthood. So the inability for deaf students in school to write good English in the country where I come from is not because they don't have good English teachers. No, it is because of lack of exposure to language within that first 5 years of life. It is like cleft palate. It is like the palate that refused to develop and close within the month that is supposed to happen in the womb before childbirth. Any palate that refuses to develop and close will not close after birth. That is food for thought. The brain is wired that language assimilation, language acquisition, up to the 80% of it happens within the first 5 years of a child's life. It didn't say it has to be spoken. Neither did it say it has to be signed. Whatever format the language is, the linguistic blank slate is hungry for language. It wants to be filled up. And it's asking, fill me up, fill me up. I'm empty. So what do we do? Our collective responsibility, caregivers, community members, mentors, is to try and expose a deaf child to any form of language within the first 5 years of life. This is one way a deaf child is going to achieve both linguistic, emotional, psychological, psychosocial, and other behavioral skills that child is going to need the rest of their lives. That is what we're saying. We're saying that every child needs language within the first 5 years of their lives, spoken or signed. Every child, deaf or hearing, needs language touch, needs language access. And they know how to deal with everything that has to do with language. And that is why we're doing this topic. And that's why we've been discussing this. So, be that as it may, we have come to the conclusion of our topic, language development in deaf children. Language development in deaf children, or deaf child language development. It's been a very wonderful set of weeks that we have been talking about this and teaching out this knowledge, and it's been so awesome. So next week I'm going to start with what happens after 5 years in a deaf child life. What happens after 5 years? What do we expect to happen when there is no language acquisition, when there is no access to language? And I know you're going to be there. Be there, don't go anywhere. Be there, and let's learn together as we have been doing. See you next week.